So welcome to LiberalViewer Wednesday Live. This is my live show I do every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, where I take my viewers' questions, your questions, if you're in the audience, and I hope some of you are joining up now. And if you can help me out, let me know if all the audio and the video, you can see me and hear me. So I take questions and give my live answers. I also answer questions that people have sent me for LiberalViewer Wednesday Live during the week. I think I have about 5 of those today that I'm going to try to answer. I actually kind of appreciate when people send me questions during the week because I can give a little more thought out answers. And I think while I have some knowledge that's useful for me to give on just sort of an impromptu question and answer, that I actually have more skills doing research, especially on like legal topics and things like that. So maybe what I say is a little more valuable if I have a little more time to look stuff up. But anyway, so let me look here in the comments section here before I get started. Just I got anyone here? I got several people watching. Can you see me? Can you hear me? I think I'm not getting any comments saying you can't, so I guess that's a good sign because those usually come pretty quickly. So let me move on to the questions I had people ask me during the week. I have, I think, 5 of those, and then I will get to the live questions and try to answer those. So I didn't get these in exactly the order. I may have missed a couple because they come through all these different ways that people send me the questions. So I'll do my best here. The first one, Terry Alther, who's had a question almost every week on LiberalViewer Wednesday Live, asks, question for Wednesday, since you know the justice system very well, I was wondering what you thought of Cenk's take on the reduction of ex-Enron CEO Jeff Skilling's sentence by 10 years. Is Cenk right that this is unfair and unbalanced? Also, what does the ACLU think of these types of issues? And there's a link to a video there. I watched the video and I did some of my own research. Cenk's broader point about the system being unfair, and that probably applies to why Jeffrey Skilling is getting a sentence reduction. I do agree with his broader point, but I watched the video that he did, and he left out some important things about why it is that Jeffrey Skilling's getting a lower sentence. What happened is his case went to the Supreme Court, and he was convicted of several different things. There's securities fraud and various other counts, and some of the counts that he was evicted of were theft of what's called honest services. And that's where instead of stealing money, you steal from someone what they expected to be an honest service they were getting from someone. It was first used against public officials to get them under federal wire fraud statutes, where what people were stealing, they were not giving people the honest services that they should be getting from someone. Rather than actually stealing money, they were stealing their expectation of getting an honest service out of someone. And anyway, there's a long history of how that was first developed in case law in the early 20th century, and then got codified by Congress into the federal criminal statutes, and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that the way it was being interpreted was too broad, and that honest services only applies, theft of honest services is only applicable in a scheme involving kickbacks or bribery, where there's some undefrauded third party who's supplying something tangible, some benefit to the person, and not just this sort of vague idea of stealing from someone their expectation that they're getting, an honest service from someone that they're not getting. And so that cut out a few of the counts that Jeffrey Skilling was convicted on, because his conviction for theft of honest services didn't involve bribery and kickbacks. So he had to be resentenced, and none of that information, none of that long story that I just talked about ended up in the Cenk Uyghur's The Young Turks story or video. He didn't mention anything about the Supreme Court. He just basically said, "Oh, there's a new Justice Department, and they were looking for a way to resentence him, and they were sick of all the appeals." He did mention appeals, but he didn't talk about the fact that Jeffrey Skilling wanted the Supreme Court that this issue of some of his counts being based on too broad a interpretation of theft of honest services. And that's important. Now, the reason Jeffrey Skilling could appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court is because he's a rich guy, and rich people do have much better access to that kind of justice. And so that's why I say Cenk's broader point about the system being unfair and when he also made a point about Jeffrey Skilling getting a lower sentence because he was giving back like $40 million to the victims. And the thing is, giving restitution, that's supposed to get you a lower sentence under the federal sentencing guidelines. And Cenk didn't really explain that. So I didn't really like Cenk's explanation, although I agree with his broader point about rich people getting better justice. But he left out a lot of the details and the issue about the theft of honest services. As to the ACLU's position, I'm not an official spokesperson for the ACLU. Sometimes when people ask me that, if I can find an ACLU position on the issue, I will pass it along, but I can't make up my own or speak for the ACLU, and I don't know what the ACLU would think of Jeffrey Skilling, although I do know that they don't like overbroad criminal statutes, so maybe they were on the side of narrowing the legal interpretation of that phrase, but I really don't know. So moving on to the next question here, we have a question. This is a question about ultra-conservative Minnesota Congressman Michelle Bachmann saying supposedly in an interview that she would move out of the country or Minnesota if they legalize gay marriage, and there's this whole thing, should we use that to get her out of the country by legalizing all 50 states? But I noticed the link for the story is to the Daily Current, which I believe is like The Onion. It's like a satirical magazine, although I would believe that story maybe, but I just happened to notice it comes from the Daily Current, so I guess, I don't know if, were you trying to trick me? Maybe someone was trying to trick me, or maybe someone just got tricked. I don't know. Sometimes those Daily Current stories, if you don't know, especially with someone like Michelle Bachmann, it's kind of hard to satirize her, so I can't really fault someone if they thought that was true when it wasn't true, because that kind of seems like something she would say. But anyway, so moving on to the next question. I actually had a couple questions about this IRS thing. Let me do a little clicking here real quick and add the other one, because this is the first one here, a long IRS question. Says, do you, being associated with the ACLU, agree with their opinion concerning the case with the IRS and the Tea Party groups, and if so, why? Just a question, not my opinion, but many of the groups propagate the idea that the IRS is run by a shadow reserve of the Federal Reserve, which is purposely trying to bankrupt American citizens, therefore making them less likely or willing to pay taxes. Do you feel like the IRS took this idea into consideration? If so, would it be legitimate grounds to scrutinize those groups more so than others, since they are basically anti-tax, since they believe their taxes are another method for government to steal from them? And then the other question I had on the IRS case was just a recent tweet. Do you see the recent IRS scandal leading to impeachment hearings? So on that first question, the ACLU put out a statement saying that this was very concerning, and the use of the IRS to look into Tea Party groups and other groups. But the other part of the ACLU statement was saying this is why the whole idea of campaign finance regulation is a First Amendment issue, and people misconstrue the whole Citizens United situation because this is, the government trying to regulate people's political speech, which seems to be what a lot of people want to do with, in response to Citizens United, is they actually want more regulation. And one of the things the ACLU spokesperson said was that this shows why we should be very careful about campaign finance regulation, and doing any kind of passing any laws restricting what people can say around an election or regulating the groups that speak around elections. These Tea Party groups, they were nonprofit corporations. Do you hear that last word there? Corporation? Because what people are getting so upset about is that the IRS is infringing on the rights of these nonprofit corporations. So that we're actually in this here concerned about the rights of a corporation. So not necessarily corporations are fully people, but we do worry when the government uses its coercive power to punish people or the corporations, nonprofit corporations that they want to form to further their political aims. And so this is one of those cases where it shows that the regulation of campaign speech through passing laws saying that certain people shouldn't be able to speak so much during an election, or the government should be checking and making sure people aren't speaking or speaking too much. That's kind of what this whole thing is about. And so I think there is a good ACLU point there that the spokesman made that a lot of people aren't paying attention to. Do I think it comes from this whole shadowy, Federal Reserve, Illuminati, I don't know exactly I hope people aren't actually reptiles in that theory somehow. I know that that's one sect of those conspiracy theorists, but on the I think that the real genesis of this is I said this on my LiberalViewer Sunday Live show where I played a couple news clips on the IRS scandal. I think that this has more to do with all the organizations that the unregulated or Citizens United opened up a door for all these new unregulated organizations to speak and become nonprofits. And the scam about it is that, and this is what I mentioned on Sunday, is that in order to take advantage of being a 501c4 and being a nonprofit that can engage in this kind of speech, or a 501c3, you have to not be mainly political. You have to be mainly for social welfare. And groups like Karl Rove's American Crossroads, all they do is campaign for and against people politically, and they just pretend that they're a social welfare organization to get the benefits of a social welfare organization. And so I think that was the genesis of this whole IRS investigation, was to try to see if people were pretending to be 501, I think it's C3 or C4 organizations here, when they weren't really social welfare organizations. And then on the last part, the tweeted question about will this result in impeachment? Well, if you look at your Constitution, I was just looking at my Constitution over here in my American Constitutional Law. It's over in the front. If you just look in Article 1, Section 2, you'll see the House of Representatives has the sole power of impeachment, and it's basically by majority vote. And it's a completely political question. We learned that during the presidency of Bill Clinton. If a majority of people in the House want to vote for impeachment, then that's it. There's no appeal from that. Of course, impeachment is just like indictment. That's like the accusation. Then it goes to the Senate for a trial. And as you remember in the case, for those of us old enough, I guess, there might be some who don't remember, but Bill Clinton was acquitted in the Senate of the charges he was impeached with by the House. But I wouldn't put anything past the Republican House, especially they seem to be, they've been waiting for a scandal. They've been looking for a scandal. They've been turning things into a scandal. And I think people have already talked about impeachment for Benghazi. So if they can whip up enough, of their base, or, if their base gets whipped up enough, or all it takes is a majority of the or the Republicans alone can impeach the president in the House of Representatives. Of course, there'd never be the votes for removal without, there'd have to be huge new facts that haven't come out yet, I guess, before there would be any grounds or any legitimate impeachment or any grounds for removal. But the House of Representatives could impeach Obama. They impeached the last Democratic president, and that was pretty bogus, so why wouldn't they do it now? Except that it politically backfired on them, and it made Clinton a lot more popular. I mean, hopefully that would deter them, but making themselves unpopular hasn't really deterred Republicans in the past from doing stupid things. So I guess that would be my answer to that question. I have a couple more. Let me see. I think I have 2 more questions that people ask me during the week as I click through here, because I'm both the performer and the technician here, so just give me a moment. I had this question. Suki on Twitter asked, I heard Castro is going to plead not guilty to kidnap rape charges with overwhelming evidence. What is the benefit? Well, last I heard, they were possibly seeking the death penalty against, this is Ariel Castro, the Cleveland guy who is charged with holding Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus and Michelle Knight for like a decade or over a decade for one of them, kidnapping, rape. And from what I understand, there may be death penalty charges for death of a fetus for like miscarriages that he supposedly induced. And so I assume that's the benefit of the not guilty plea. Even with the overwhelming evidence, there's the possibility of the death penalty. Or there may be other reasons to other conditions that would be worth working for a plea bargain. And there are always reasons to come up with a plea bargain. I mean, from the state's point of view, first of all, I'm sure those women don't really want to go through a trial. I suppose I shouldn't speak for them. Maybe some of them would find some sort of therapy and testifying, but usually people, from my experience as a criminal defense attorney, just do not want to go through the whole court system, and that's a reason why the state might accept a plea bargain, especially if that's something the victims want, and the defendant has a right to a jury trial to confront the witnesses and the evidence against him, and can usually come up with at least some benefit of a bargain from giving those things up. So that's my answer to that question. Then I have one more question. This came during the week. What are your thoughts on the recent e-drama between Dark Matter 2525 on the Dark Antics channel and the Cartesian Theist? Sorry for any spelling errors. Well, I haven't really followed that. The only thing I saw on that was I saw a Thunderfoot video talking about that and about some things that Coughlin did. And basically, I guess it involved one person impersonating other people online and saying nasty things in order to defame that person. I don't know any of the real facts of what happened. It sounded nasty. The only thing I could comment is the legal issues one legal issue I saw that Thunderfoot raised in his video about what happened there, and also with him and Coughlin, was the difference between impersonation and parody. If you're impersonating someone, you're actually trying to make everyone think that you're that person, and then if you say nasty things, you are defaming that person. And there's at least civil liability for defamation, slander or libel, depending on whether you're doing it in speaking or in writing. I don't know. It's kind of a mixture when things are on the internet sometimes. But it's all defamation, and that's at least a civil claim. And for private people, if it's not true and it hurts your reputation, and then there may be some civil damages, or that seems like a lot to go through for some online thing. It would be difficult to sue someone, but not impossible. And there's some people who believe in like criminal slander. I think that goes a little too far. And then the issue of parody, I think there was some issue. I think Thunderfoot talked about how someone did like nasty things to him, where they like photoshopped his head onto somebody in like pornographic images. But then there was another situation where someone created a fake Thunderfoot Twitter account that looked just like his account, And that's really the issue between impersonation and parody, between defamation and protected parody speech. And there's actually a Supreme Court case about this. It's I used a Larry Flint clip in I think my first Liberal Viewer Sunday episode, talking about this case where Larry Flint went to the Supreme Court because he did this parody of Jerry Falwell, this right-wing conservative preacher, and put in his Hustler magazine this ad, or it was like a fake drinking alcohol ad, if I remember correctly, and it said something about it was like some memory where he was talking about how he lost his virginity with his mother in an outhouse, or he was conceived by something about Jerry Falwell's family member having sex in an outhouse in some way. I can't remember the exact facts, and the Supreme Court said it was protected speech because no one would really believe that the story was true. It was obviously a joke. And so the more obvious it is that it's a joke, the more it's protected speech. And then the more people would be fooled, like, impersonating someone's Twitter account, then that's defamation. So I just wanted to make that point. That's the only thing I think I can really add. Because as to the e-drama, I try not to follow e-dramas too closely, and I think it's impersonating and harassing people online is definitely wrong, and it's not that I endorse that. I don't want to give that impression when I talk about First Amendment rights. It's just that I happen to believe in First Amendment issues. You have a right to offend people as long as you're not defrauding people by with impersonation, or hurting people's reputation by making people believe things that aren't true. And so those are the lines. So those were the questions I got during the week to answer. I'm going to go, looks like I do have a bunch of people watching, and hopefully I got some questions that people are asking. Here, let me just check my live control room here real quick. Where is that? Is that this one? Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, I do have a bunch of viewers here, and got about 10 or 20 questions waiting, so let me refresh this page, and maybe I can start answering some of your questions. Please don't spam. I hate that. I just want to say, I don't know why people go through and spam, mark other people's comments as spam. I always go through and I actually search for the word spam, and I unspam them all unless they're actual spam. But if they're just like people trying to get rid of comments they don't like, please don't do that. That is against all the free speech principles that I believe in. So let's see. Army Boy 57, first question. Given the left equivalent of the IRS investigating the NAACP in 2004, would you happen to know if the ACLU ever gave any statement upon discovering this incident? Yes, the ACLU did give a statement. I already talked about that. I don't know. I could probably put a link up to it. It was actually in a little CNN editorial. But if you search for ACLU, if you go to the Google News search and you put in ACLU and IRS, you will come up with this deputy. I can't remember. I think his name is McLeod, MCLEOD, something like that. McLeod, who is a spokesperson for the ACLU in Washington, D.C., I think, said that there are awful implications of this scandal, and we should all be very concerned and about this Tea Party targeting of Tea Party groups or conservative groups by the IRS. And he also made the further statement in this thing that's on the CNN webpage, this blog entry on the CNN webpage about how it should also show us why we need to be concerned about other laws that regulate people's speech around elections, because it just gives the government opportunity to engage in these kinds of viewpoint-based campaigns to suppress people's right to express themselves, or assemble into groups for political purposes. Okay, people say they can see and hear me. That's good. I'd never. Let's see. Great Pirate Solomon asks, what is your take on the legality of the Department of Justice seizing the AP phone records? While I personally find the action reprehensible, I wouldn't be shocked to find out it's legal under the Patriot Act. Well, that may well be true. I've been watching a lot about this on Fox News, and it's kind of ironic because, for those people who don't know, back in, I think it was May 2012, there was a attempted terrorist attack. Was it on an airplane? I think it was on an airplane that was foiled before it happened. That was supposed to coincide with the anniversary of the killing of Osama bin Laden. And there was an AP report that came out that said that the way that the attack was foiled is that they had a mole somewhere in Yemen who was like pretending to be Al Qaeda who let us know about this. And and at the time this happened, this was like one of the big CIA leaks that there was this whole campaign from Republicans in Congress and Fox News saying the Obama administration is hurting national security by leaking things that make them look good. You know, when they foil terrorist plots, they're leaking stuff to make them look good, and it's putting people at risk, like this mole was put at risk in Yemen because, you know, you don't want to give that out in the story that we have a mole in Al Qaeda in Yemen. That, you know, kind of puts the guy's life at risk and our ability to get information about pending terrorist attacks. So it was the Republicans and Fox News who were all mad about this leak. And so based on that, the Justice Department or the FBI started to investigate the leak. It was actually the Deputy Attorney General, because Eric Holder was one of the people questioned as a possible leaker. And so he put it to his Deputy Attorney General to put out the subpoena to get all the records from AP and the phone records. They didn't actually listen to any phone calls, but they got all the records of the phone calls that they made in that time period to see, you know, who leaked this information. You know, and that's one thing that's important to remember is the reporters weren't the target of the investigation. It was the government official somewhere in the Justice Department probably who leaked the information about the mole in Yemen. So they weren't going after the reporters, they were actually going after the reporters' sources by trying to look at their phone records. And that in itself, that's perfectly legal, even without the Patriot Act. What may be a problem here is supposedly the scope of what they looked at may have been too broad, and they didn't follow the procedures that the Department of Justice is supposed to follow after some of these same things happen under the Nixon administration, or there are all these procedures and forms and things they're supposed to check off that they didn't really do. So I'm waiting to see more details on that, but at least the basic idea of getting phone records to look for a leak, I mean, that may be legal not under the Patriot Act, because they're trying to find the government official who let out the fact that we have this mole, this Al Qaeda mole in Yemen, and the government actually should be able to do that. The question is whether the scope of what they looked for, and they went too far. So I have time for one or two more questions here. I'll just go up the list here. I have a Scout STR295 asks, do you think that left-wing news outlets like MSNBC can harm democracy just as badly as Fox News by reducing essential discussions to boilerplate ideological arguments? I do think that there's a big danger to democracy and to our democracy here in the United States if people in our political discussions, even if we have differences of opinion, it's important on some level if we can agree on the same facts, because that's just reality. If we can if we can have a good starting point where everyone agrees on the same facts, then the differing opinions is something we can work on. But what worries me about Fox News and maybe MSNBC, although as I've said in many videos, I don't think MSNBC is as dishonest as Fox News. It does have, its partisan people in the who get in their opinion shows, and it also, I think, in the way it frames issues possibly, and the issues it chooses to report on. I've been seeing more of that as I've gotten my TiVo with the 4 tuners, and I can, as news is breaking, and as I can switch between CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC a lot more these days, and I do see how they frame the issues differently. But and I do worry that in any way the media is fragmenting what we all agree on is the facts, that does hurt democracy. But that's why I stress the fact that Fox News is more dishonest than MSNBC, because it's more harmful, because it's stopping us from being able to have that agreement on what the facts are, and then we can have our arguments based on our differences of opinion. So I think that I'm over 30 minutes at this point, and I unfortunately do have some other things to do this afternoon, so I'm going to cut this short here, but I appreciate everyone's questions during the week and the live questions here, and I hope to see you all on my live clip show at 6:30 p.m. Pacific on Sunday, Liberal Viewer live clip roundup, and then every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific I'm doing this live Wednesday show. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the coming week.